Good morning, Jan.
Good morning, Jeff. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again. I know it's been some time, and episode 4 of the Growth Ripples podcast.
Yep,
Now,
that's
we've got a
right.
very interesting topic. Now, we figured we mix it up. 4 points of conversation or 4 topics, 15, 20 minutes. Are you up for it?
Absolutely, Jeff. Always.
So, tell me, racism, where did it come from?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jeff, and it's something that I've been reflecting on a lot. And
Hmm,
even from childhood, we've talked about it a little bit in some of our other podcast episodes.
we have.
Yeah, and just to recap quickly for people, I mean, I kind of got exposed to it very early on with a German mother, and she had very strong accent, and so I would pick up on some of the things that people would say to her back in the 80s when I was a young boy.
Hmm,
And then a lot of my friends, I kind of gravitated more to multicultural Australia rather than white Australia. So a lot of my friends, I would say, are more multicultural than I look, at first appearances.
hmm,
And so that's really shaped a lot of what I see in the world, which I hope is a bit of a unique perspective, but a growing perspective, because I think there is a whole raft of people across the spectrum of the human race that are really trying to address this. And so from my understanding, my research, and just looking into psychology, I mean, I think it's pretty fundamental as to where racism comes from. I think it's that fear of the unknown.
hmm,
And we've grown up, or we've evolved, I should say, in kind of tribal groups where you've got the in tribe and the out tribe, and the out tribe is not safe and the in tribe is safe. And so as we've evolved, one of the quickest ways to determine whether someone is in or out is the way that they look, the superficial appearances. So while I firmly believe, there's just one human race in that sense, there is a number of races in terms of how we see externally, and we still need
hmm.
to recognize that, because also that individuality and that diversity is so important. So the more I read and the more I see from activists in this area, it's not about seeing everyone free of color. It's about seeing everyone's individuality and recognizing that and celebrating it, because we're now in a time of wealth, we're now in a time of abundance. We don't have the same scarcity factors, yet
Hmm.
our brains are still in this state of automatic in or out. Are you white? Are you black? Are you whatever?
I'm apparently
Um,
yellow. I didn't get it.
yeah, exactly. So, at the end of the day, I think it makes kind of logical sense in terms of our evolution. But I think we're also at this transition point, and I hope there's more of a movement. Unfortunately, seeing some of the far right parties around the world sort of, getting more power in certain countries, I think that's sort of being questioned. But, even seeing Brazil elections, I don't know if you saw that, but I
Yeah.
think quite a left-leaning leader was elected, which was great to see, someone who actually wanted to bring the Brazilian people together, where we know there's been a lot of division in Brazil, by race and by other kind of ethnic sort of lines. So I think that's where it kind of fundamentally comes from. And I think as a white male, I think there's a lot of privilege that has come with, just birth luck is what I call it. Like I'm just someone who was born into a white family. It's not like any of us choose, or at least I don't believe we choose who we're born
Hmm.
to. And I think if at the moment, unfortunately, a lot of white males have a lot of power and a lot of status quo power. And so if people are going to listen to me a little bit more, perhaps because I am white and I am male, then I'm going to make sure I'm using that voice for good and hopefully for positive change. And with that, I think means that, my son, he's obviously white, he's blue-eyed like me. He's blonde at the moment, will probably go brown like me, hair wise, before it thins out like mine, and grays. But the thing about for him, I very much recognize that, I kind of hope that he grows up in a world where he has less privilege than I had, because
Hmm.
that means we're having a movement towards more equity, and more equality. Because I think when we all kind of have more power and more opportunity, actually the world gets bigger and it also has more opportunity for everybody. I think there's this real fear in a lot of status quo white male leaders, where there's this fear for anyone that's not like them. But actually, if we've got great healthcare, if we've got great education, that probably means, or not probably, the data shows it and the studies show it, less crime. We've got less social issues. So actually addressing some of those inequities actually leads to better outcomes for everyone, not just for the people that we would deem as minority. And again, the irony, like we talked about before, Jeff, is, actually the minority in this world is white people, white males like myself.
Mm.
Yet we control a lot more of the power than we should. So yeah, that's kind of where kind of this thinking and I guess what I was keen to talk about with you, Jeff, and those 4 points that we kind of
Yeah.
came together on.
It's always a bit of a conversation between you and I, Jan.
Mm,
And early on, you very much mentioned that it's an evolutionary thing. You can sort of see it as a very much a human nature type of trait or
mm,
survival instinct in a way to only recognize those people who, on a surface level, look like us in a way, right?
yep.
Now, I know I posed this question to you before.
Yeah.
How does one break that sort of human sort of instinct to judge in a way, so to
Yeah.
speak, on that surface level?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think first of all, and maybe even taking a slight step back from the question, is
Mm,
that I think we need to recognize that our brain is wired to take shortcuts. So our ability to look at in out group, in a split second, and I think there's again plenty of research out there that shows that we can make those split judgments, whether we call it bias or whatever, very, very quickly. And the reason for that is evolutionary again, because if our brain and our mind had to think every single time it did something, it would be one, exhausting, but number two, you probably wouldn't get any decisions made. So I think the first piece is kind of understanding and awareness. Then the second piece is going, okay, I'm going to make a conscious effort to be more aware of it. So when it pops up, when I kind of get a discomfort, and I'll share something, when I first went to America, like
mm,
having grown up in Australia and never having been to the States or to the African continent at that point, I'll be quite blunt and open, is like I had never seen so many African Americans around. And because of what had been shown on TV, particularly in the 80s and 90s, I remember just having this uneasy feeling, but I didn't understand why. And it wasn't until I reflected about, well, if I've been fed all this imagery about, well, white people should fear people who are not white, then it's just natural that I'm going to probably have this kind of uneasiness. But
mm,
then because I was able to recognize it, then I could actually, well, hang on, no, like I need to question that. I can't just accept that for truth because it's not the truth. And again, if you look at the stats, I think if anything, and we're just at Halloween today, when we're, day after Halloween in terms of when we're filming this, I think the world has more to fear from white graying males, such as people of generations above mine, than we do for anyone of color or anyone who is
mm,
more diverse than the white pale males that you often see in the boardrooms of a lot of big companies. So again, it's not to kind of shame white males. I'm a white male. I don't feel I need to feel necessarily shame. What I think we need to do is commit to how do we change that? So awareness, that's the first thing. I mean, you can't change anything unless you're aware of it. And then number two, it's about some of that self-reflection and then really noticing yourself in the moment and trying to jump ahead so that you don't just react and kind of go into a self-defensive mode, or you kind of coming into seeing the world as being harmful to you
mm.
because someone is of a different race or a different look to you. And I think that, it sounds simple, but it's not. It's something that you have to keep practicing, kind of like meditation or something else,
You're
like
training
anything
the
in
muscle
life.
in a way.
Exactly. Yeah, love it, Jeff. You got to train the muscle, like driving a
Mm.
car. Like when you first get in the car, you can't be expected to, especially if it's a manual car, to be driving around without bunny hopping a little bit here and
You
there.
can't be a Formula One driver. You got to stick with the go karts.
100%. Yeah. So take the baby steps and also show some self-compassion. So, I think we're probably all capable of being racist, wherever we've come from. But I think the point is, how do we stop and prevent ourselves from being racist in the future? And I mean, when I say racist, I don't mean just like, the behaviors, but also mean the thinking. And so trying to rewire the brain a little bit, again, starts with awareness, starts with sort of circuit breaking that full cycle. Does that make sense?
I think you nailed it. Circuit breaking the cycle
Yeah.
and very much awareness. And I think I just want to reiterate, you're not bad mouthing, you're just citing an observation and you just want to fundamentally bring about a bit more equality and equity in this world. That's it. It's
That's right. Because I
which is
think ultimately, and this is how I think about my business, it's how I think
mm,
about what I want to focus on in the world, is how can I help whatever level it is to make it a better place for my son and his generation? Because I don't want him and his friends to be growing up in the kind of racist, kind of toxic environments that we still see, unfortunately, in 2022. So I want to kind of address that and play my part in specifically focusing on workplaces, because that's what I know. It's kind of my area of expertise, I suppose. And so I'll do whatever I can to help shift that. And it's not going to happen overnight, but I think organization by organization, and if we're all committed to this cause about making us all better as a human race, then I think we can get there. Yeah, I don't know how long it'll take, but yeah, I think if we focus on those small things, it definitely helps in getting there along the way.
And I think you made a key point, as we sort of wind down towards, 2022 and we move into the new year, progress is very much making that first step.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate the chat, and I think we've covered already a lot of ground in quite a short but hopefully sharp podcast for people.
And we're looking forward to getting some feedback. But Jan, as always, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Jeff.